Welcome back to the North Star Takes podcast with Bailey Policki and Jacob Liberta. You can find all our videos here on our YouTube channel and feel free to give us a follow on both Twitter and Instagram as well. Today we will be discussing the shocking news that came out of Minnesota Wildland on Tuesday. Minnesota Wild have bought out the contracts of Zach Parise and Ryan Suter in kind of a shocking move, clearing the way for them to get rid of their two longtime superstars that they've had since 2012. Back then, they signed 13-year contracts, I believe, for a total of roughly $90 million. Just an insane, unprecedented contract at the time. And the NHL actually made a rule after that saying that players couldn't sign that big of a contract anymore. So what is your initial reaction to the Wild buying out these contracts? I feel like most people aren't too surprised about Parise, but I think the Suter one's got to surprise a lot of people.
Yes, for sure. I'm in lockstep with you there. I think kind of going back to that last comment you made about the contract length and the NHL basically axing that going forward, I think that I kind of wish that was a thing back then before they signed these contracts, because then we'd be off the hook and we wouldn't need to be doing things like this, buying them out and whatnot, and incurring basically all these future cap charges. But as far as just from a roster standpoint, losing these guys as players go, like money aside, I think the Parise buyout isn't surprising. He was already on the decline. I mean, he was a healthy scratch for a number of games last year, so that's not really a shock. He just kind of was losing his place on this team. But as far as Suter goes, that's kind of blindsiding, because he's been our most reliable defenseman for the past decade. So I mean, he's just been a steady force. And obviously, everybody always talks about his ice minutes. How he always, like, at least before, not as recently, but before, like in his heyday, he was like leading the NHL consistently in ice time. So like he was always available, which was nice. And he was just a solid defenseman. Now, obviously, he's aging a little bit, but I didn't think quite so much where we'd buy him out too. But I guess, Guerin does things his way. And
yes, he does.
I respect that, honestly. And I can't ask anything else of my GM, honestly, just to be confident in what he's doing. And let's see what happens here with this extra cap space we just created.
Yeah, it kind of signals to me that, them as players weren't necessarily the problem. Obviously, Suter was still productive. He was still a top 4 defenseman for us. But I think Guerin just kind of wanted to signal the end of this last regime. He wanted to get the old guard out, just completely change the culture in the locker room. The locker room had already kind of shifted anyways. I think guys like Jared Spurgeon and Marcus Foligno and even maybe like Joel Eriksson Ek have already kind of taken over leadership roles, and they're kind of the new guys in the locker room. But I think that, the time just came. You're not going to have a future with Parise and Suter.
No.
And you're going to have to bite the bullet eventually, so you might as well just do it now. They got themselves an extra $10 million in cap relief this upcoming season. They gave themselves another $2 million next season, but then the following seasons after that, both Parise and Suter have a combined $15 million plus cap charge in the third and fourth years that they're owed money. So the Wild basically gave themselves some flexibility for the upcoming 2 seasons, but then the following 2 seasons, they're going to be in cap hell, basically. So it'll be interesting to see how they approach this offseason and if they try to be big players in the trade or free agent market, considering that they're not going to be able to sign a guy to a huge contract that has a big cap hit in years 3 and 4 down the road, because
they can't afford it.
They literally cannot afford it, and they still got to re-sign Kaprizov and Fiala. So I think it's going to be interesting to see where they go from here, because they have immediate flexibility with their cap space, but down the road it's going to be much more difficult.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of a nightmare thinking about the scenario like a few years from now, incurring all of that dead cap. But as far as the situation right now, I think this is about as good of timing as you could make it. Like you said, if we're going to do it, you might as well do it now, because when we're in a unique off season where basically all of our best players are all owed new contracts now. Between, obviously, we just extended Ek, and then we have Fiala and Kaprizov are still lurking out there and need new deals. But it kind of makes sense from that standpoint. It's like create cap space now, so you can still sign these guys for now, and you don't worry about cap hits later. So as long as you can keep your best players in house, especially for guys like you said from the old regime that honestly will be known for consistently making the playoffs and making the Wild relevant. But just not really going anywhere. Not really being a true championship contender. And I think it's good Guerin's kind of sweeping it away. I mean, granted, I like you said, they're likable guys, and it was a fun core, especially for a while, especially early on when we first got them. But I mean, it came time basically in and from my perspective, I'd say the inflection point was really when we lost that series against St. Louis a few years back when we had over 100 points. I think it was the best season in franchise history.
It was, yes, points wise, yep.
And we had home ice and everything. We lost in, I think, 5 games or something. Yeah. I think that was the end of the core. And then, sure enough, everybody, like, piece by piece started going out the door.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think it helps having a guy like Parise and having a guy like Fiala. You can kind of see the other side of the tunnel, if you will. Mm-hmm. You can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it doesn't hurt as much losing these guys, even though they're fading in their careers. They're still fan favorites. They're 2 of the better players in Wild history, and so it'll be interesting. But transitioning to how the Wild are going to attack the expansion draft now, I think this all but guarantees that they're going to protect Matt Dumba. Because with the way the rules are, you can protect 7 forwards, 3 defensemen, or 1 goalie, or you can just do 8 skaters in general and 1 goalie. I think most teams typically do the 7-3-1 method. So now with Suter out of the fold, you obviously are protecting Spurgeon and Jonas Brodin. And then that leaves Matt Dumba to be protected as well. And Bill Guerin has stated on multiple occasions how much he likes Matt Dumba and he thinks he's a good leader for this team. So I could see Dumba sticking around now for sure. There's a possibility they still might try to trade him. Yeah. Depending what you could get for him. But I think they at least protect him through the expansion draft, and then we'll see what happens from there. And then Nico Sturm, who's kind of had a solid under-the-radar season this last season. He's a good center. He can be your 4th-line center, maybe even your 3rd-line center. He's got some good speed. He's aggressive, plays well on the boards. So I think they could find a way to keep him around now too. And then you'll basically end up exposing Carson Soucy, Capo Kakinen, and then there's some other younger minor league players that they could possibly lose as well. But I think their options of who Seattle can take now have dwindled drastically.
That's true. I think this definitely opens up a path because before having Parise and Suter, they obviously had the no-move clauses and they had to be protected in situations like this. So that kind of left us susceptible to potentially giving up a lot, like leaving – how am I trying to say this? Leaving a lot of our best players out available so the Kraken just basically to take their pick, which would be kind of painful just to keep Parise and Suter around when they're past the prime of their careers, like well past, and they're obviously, like you said, fading. But I think another thing too, going back to the Dumba conversation, I don't know how much I love the idea of keeping him around for the long haul. I'm still pretty skeptical, but I mean, maybe Guerin's got another trick up his sleeve where he wants to protect him so then he can turn around and trade him, because that would probably be a nightmare scenario maybe in his mind if, like, let's say he was left available in the expansion draft and the Kraken took him and then basically wheeled and dealed him, turned around, sold him to somebody else. And
that could happen.
Exactly. So I think, I wouldn't say he's going to be here for the long haul yet, but I mean, granted, like you said, he's made the comments where he's in support of Dumba. So I don't know. I'll just say I'm not a big Dumba guy, and I mean, I don't think you are either. But
I'm a little indifferent. As a defenseman, he just doesn't play great defense. His offensive talent is unquestioned. It's just whether or not he's actually using it. I mean, he has a lot of cold stretches throughout the seasons. He had a really good year a couple of years ago before it ended early to injury. What I was going to say, though, is I could see Dumba sticking around for another year at least, because now that we lose Suter, your only 2 like proven defensemen are Brodin and Spurgeon. You kind of keep Dumba around as just that solid 3rd defenseman, because you're going to have to go, if you lose Soucy especially, you're going to have to go find more defensemen. You could maybe bring back Ian Cole, but he's nothing more than a 3rd-line defenseman. So they're going to have to go find guys, or maybe even call up a guy like Kalen Addison and see if he can just take over that role. But they don't really know what they have for their back-end defensemen. So I could see them trying to keep Dumba just to kind of stabilize that position, at least for a year, before they find out what they actually have.
Yeah, that's a valid consideration too, especially when you're starting talking about depth like that. When now Suter's out of the picture, and then like you said, if you lose a guy like Soucy in the expansion draft, and it's like, oh crap, and all of a sudden we're losing defensemen right and left like that, and then you need bodies, especially competent ones, hopefully. So I mean, that would probably start with Dumba, because obviously he's been around here for a while, and he obviously is pretty solid. But I mean, granted, again, still leaves some to be desired in my opinion. But I think you're not going to do better with replacing him in like the immediate future. Like
correct.
This. So it would make sense to keep him around for a year, and then who knows, maybe you can turn around and trade him when you have a better outlook as far as where this roster's going beyond just this season, especially like once you get Fiala and Parise locked up, and then you're not worrying about that next offseason. So that's another thing to consider. But.
Yeah, I think before we wrap up here, I don't know if this really improves our odds of going and getting a guy like Jack Eichel, honestly, just because, like we've talked about before, the way the cap relief is set up for, just for these next couple of years, and then it's going to be horrible the next couple of years after that. I just don't see with the massive contract that Jack Eichel has how they'd be able to afford it. Plus, he still has to get neck surgery he's got some sort of disc injury in his neck, and apparently a hockey player, there's never been a hockey player to have this surgery before. So it's going to be interesting, and he still hasn't gotten it. So even if he got it now, he wouldn't be ready to play right away when the season starts. So I just don't know if Bill Guerin would make that kind of risky move, especially when he's trying to win right now with the team he's got.
Yeah.
I definitely think he's going to trade for somebody. I think he's going to go get a center of some sort, but I don't think it's going to end up being Jack Eichel.
I honestly hope it's not Eichel because I don't love the injury history. I don't love that I hear things about him being bad for a locker room. Yeah. So that's another concern. And then probably you'd have to trade the farm for him, and that's really rolling the dice and banking on basically having a great first line on this team before we're going to start picking it apart like that for stars.
So, yeah.
I mean, obviously you want to pick your battles and make your moves as far as acquiring star talent, but it's just I don't know about Jack Eichel.
Yeah, I'm with you there. So,
but definitely comment below if you think Jack Eichel is on the move for the Wild, really, if that's who we should be going after.
Or if you have any other center suggestions as well. I mean, there's all sorts of names that could be thrown out there. So if you think if you know of somebody that you think would be a good fit with the Wild, feel free to drop their name below.
Yeah, there's got to be somebody better than Eichel out there as far as being more feasible option as far as giving up less too.
But with that, that'll do it for this edition of the North Star Takes podcast. Be sure to like our videos and stay tuned for more content by subscribing to our YouTube channel. And feel free to give us a follow on Instagram and Twitter as well. Thanks for watching.